Apache woman offered herself to save her starving daughter, but the rancher fed them instead. The land was wide and silent, stretching farther than the eye could see. Dry wind moved across the plains, carrying dust instead of rain. The sun was low, but its heat still pressed down heavily, making every step feel harder than the last. In this open land walked a woman and a small girl. They moved slowly, as if the ground itself resisted them. The woman held the child's hand tightly, afraid that if she let go, even for a moment, she might lose her forever. The woman was Apache, raised among people who respected the earth and understood hardship. She had once lived in a close community where food was shared and stories were told around the fire at night. But those days were gone. Hunger, loss, and fear had broken her world apart piece by piece. Now all that mattered was the little girl beside her, her daughter, her heart, her reason to keep walking even when her body begged her to stop. The child's steps were weak, her thin legs trembled, and her breathing was shallow. Her face, once full of laughter, looked pale and tired. The woman noticed every sign of her daughter's weakness, and each one cut deeply into her chest. She had given the child the last piece of dried food that morning, even though it meant she would go without. A mother could endure hunger, but watching her child suffer was a pain beyond words. They had been walking for days, moving from one place to another, hoping to find kindness somewhere along the way. Some people turned them away, others pretended not to see them at all. The woman did not blame them. Life was hard for everyone, and fear made people close their doors. Still, with every rejection, her hope grew thinner, just like her daughter's small body. As the sun slowly sank, the woman saw something in the distance. A ranch. It stood alone, surrounded by open land, with a simple house and a few wooden fences. Smoke rose gently from a chimney, a sign of warmth and food. The sight made her heart race. She knew this might be her last chance. If this place turned them away too, she did not know how much longer her daughter could survive. The woman stopped walking and knelt beside the child. She brushed dust from the girl's hair and looked into her tired eyes. "Just a little more," she whispered softly. The girl nodded, trusting her mother without question. That trust was both a blessing and a burden. The woman felt the weight of it pressing down on her as they continued forward. Each step toward the ranch filled her with fear. She had learned that asking for help often came with a price. Many times before, she had been judged for who she was, for the clothes she wore, for the language she spoke. She had been treated as if her pain mattered less than others. But this time, she was ready to give whatever was asked of her. Her pride no longer mattered. Her dignity felt small compared to her daughter's life. As they reached the edge of the property, the sound of animals and the smell of cooked food filled the air. The child lifted her head slightly, drawn by the scent. Her stomach growled softly, a sound that made the woman's eyes burn with tears. She held her daughter closer, steadying her as they approached the house. The door opened, and a man stepped outside. He was a rancher, strong but calm, with eyes that had seen many seasons come and go. He noticed the woman and child immediately. They were not hard to miss, dust-covered, thin, and clearly exhausted. The man did not speak right away. He simply watched, trying to understand what kind of trouble had found its way to his door. The woman stood still, unsure of what to do. Her hands shook slightly as she gathered the courage to speak. Words felt heavy in her mouth. She had practiced this moment in her mind many times, but now that it was real, fear threatened to silence her. She looked down at her daughter, who leaned against her leg, barely able to stand. "My child is hungry," the woman finally said in simple English. Her voice was low but steady. "She has not eaten enough in days." The rancher's eyes moved from the woman to the child. He saw the truth in her words without needing more explanation. The girl's condition told a story of long nights, empty meals, and endless walking. Still, the man did not rush forward. Life had taught him caution just as it had taught the woman desperation. The woman took a deep breath. She knew that pity alone might not be enough. People often felt sorry but did nothing. Her heart pounded as she prepared herself to say the words she never thought she would speak. She had reached a point where fear of losing her child was greater than fear of losing herself. "I will work," she said quickly. "I will work," she said quickly. "Please just feed her." The silence that followed felt endless. The wind moved through the grass, and somewhere in the distance, an animal called out. The woman felt exposed, as if her entire life stood open before a stranger. Memories of her past flashed through her mind, days when she was strong, respected, and hopeful. Now she stood here, asking for mercy. The rancher studied her carefully. He saw not weakness, but a mother pushed to the edge by circumstances beyond her control. He saw love in the way she held her daughter, in the way her body leaned slightly forward, ready to shield the child from harm. This was not a trick or a lie. This was survival. The child shifted and nearly fell. The woman caught her just in time, her arms tightening around the small body. That moment changed everything. The rancher stepped closer, his expression softening. He had seen hunger before, but seeing it in a child always struck deeper. "Come inside," he said at last. The woman hesitated, unsure if she had heard correctly. Hope felt dangerous. It had disappointed her too many times before. But the rancher opened the door wider and stepped aside, making space for them to enter. Slowly, carefully, she guided her daughter forward. Inside the house, warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. The smell of food was stronger now, making the child's eyes widen slightly. The woman lowered her daughter onto a chair, watching closely to make sure she was safe. Her heart raced, still unsure what would happen next. The rancher moved quietly, bringing water first. He placed it gently in front of the child, then turned toward the stove. The woman stood still, her hands clasped tightly, waiting. She felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether she would fall or be saved. As the rancher prepared food, the woman looked around the simple room. It was not rich or fancy, but it was clean and peaceful. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life where her daughter did not have to beg for survival. The thought was almost too painful to hold. This was the beginning of a moment that would change everything, though the woman did not know it yet. All she knew was that, for the first time in many days, her daughter was about to eat. And in that small act, a fragile hope began to grow. Quiet, uncertain, but alive. The woman watched as her daughter's small hands reached for the food. The little girl hesitated at first, as if afraid it might disappear like everything else had in their life. Hunger was a powerful teacher, but it also made her cautious. The mother's heart ached as she encouraged her softly. "It's okay, my love. Eat. You need strength." Slowly, the girl took a small bite. The crunch of the bread seemed louder than anything else in the room, and the woman felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief because her child was finally getting something to eat, and fear because the world had taught her that acts of kindness often came at a cost. She wanted to believe that the rancher's offer was genuine, But her experiences had left scars that could not be ignored. Years of struggle had hardened her in some ways and softened her in others. She had survived harsh winters, long stretches without enough food, and countless moments where people turned their backs on her. And yet here she was, standing in a warm kitchen, watching someone feed her child without asking for anything in return. It was almost too much to trust. As the girl ate, the woman noticed every detail of the rancher. He moved with care, quietly bringing plates and water, making sure the child had what she needed. There was no hurry, no judgment in his eyes, only calm and observation. He seemed to understand that desperation could make people do things they never imagined they would. Perhaps he had seen it before, or perhaps he just recognized it instinctively. Either way, the woman felt a small flicker of hope, fragile but growing. Even as hope grew, shame and fear tugged at her heart. She had come here ready to offer herself in exchange for food, a decision born of desperation, not desire. She had imagined that people would see a woman like her and think only of weakness. She had thought that survival required sacrifice, even of herself. But the rancher did not react the way she feared. He did not step back or demand anything of her. He only acted with quiet care, letting the child eat first, as if understanding that her needs were most important. The woman's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. She thought of the long days of walking, the nights spent shivering under the open sky, and the endless search for food and safety. She thought of all the times she had begged, pleaded, and offered more than she should have just to keep her daughter alive. And now, finally, someone was giving her what she had been seeking, without demanding the impossible in return. She did not understand it fully, but she felt gratitude rise like a small, stubborn flame. When the child had eaten enough to sit quietly, the woman finally spoke, her voice low but steady. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her words catching in her throat. "I have nothing to offer."
"I can only ask for mercy for my child."
She glanced at the rancher, her eyes wide and anxious, waiting for judgment or rejection. The room was quiet except for the crackling of the fire in the stove. The rancher nodded slightly. "No need for thanks," he said in a calm voice. "The child needed food. That is enough." His words were simple, but they carried weight. In that moment, the woman realized that not everyone measured kindness in the same way. Some people helped because it was the right thing to do, not because they wanted something in return. It was a revelation she had almost forgotten existed. Despite the reassurance, fear lingered. She had come prepared to sacrifice herself, expecting rejection, anger, or demand for repayment. Her mind could not yet believe that someone might act purely out of compassion. She had learned too early in life that hope without caution was dangerous. Every smile from strangers had once ended in disappointment. Every hand extended had eventually withdrawn. And yet, here, for the first time in years, someone had given her child what she needed without expectation. The rancher watched as the woman tried to compose herself. He noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly, and the cautious way she moved. It was clear that she was not used to kindness. He had seen many travelers come and go, some looking for work, others for food, but few like her, few who carried such a heavy burden of fear and love at the same time. It was rare to see desperation and dignity coexist in one person so clearly. After a while, the woman's daughter leaned against her, finally full enough to rest. The child's small body relaxed for the first time in days, and a tiny, tired smile appeared on her face. The woman's heart swelled with a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief because her daughter could rest without pain from hunger. sorrow because the mother knew this safety was fragile. One day they would need to move again. One day they would have to face hunger or cold once more. But for now, this moment, brief and quiet, was enough to give her hope. The woman knew she had to explain herself more fully. She had to show that she was not a threat, and that she came with respect, not demands. "We do not mean trouble," she said softly. "We are only trying to survive. I will work. I can do anything you need." Her words were not proud. They were honest. She offered labor, service, and her skills, anything to show that she could contribute, even if her pride was hurt. The rancher considered her words carefully. He had seen pride crumble under hardship, and he had seen people who were capable of much more than they believed, if only they were given a chance. He decided to respond not with judgment, but with an opportunity. "There is work that needs doing," he said. "If you are willing, you can help with the chores around the ranch. You and your daughter can stay until you are ready to move on." The woman's eyes widened. Relief and disbelief battled in her chest. Work? She had expected demands she could not meet, punishment for asking help, or some impossible price. Instead, he offered something she could do, something that would allow her to survive with dignity. The weight of hope pressed down on her, but in a good way, a promise of stability, even if temporary. Over the next hours, she began to see the rhythm of life at the ranch. The rancher and his few workers moved efficiently, tending to animals, mending fences, and preparing food. There was no rush, no anger, no expectation beyond honest effort. The woman found herself studying the routines, learning small lessons about work and patience, and realizing that the world could still operate in fairness and order, even for someone like her. The child, once too weak to play, began to explore the edges of the property under her mother's careful watch. Tiny feet pattered on the ground, hands reaching out to touch animals and plants. Laughter, soft and rare, escaped her lips. The sound was foreign and beautiful, filling the mother's heart with warmth she had not felt in months. She watched her daughter, feeling both joy and caution. Happiness was still a delicate thing, one that could vanish if misjudged. Night fell, and the woman prepared for her first night inside a proper home in weeks. She laid a blanket near the fireplace for her daughter and another for herself. The warmth of the room was comforting, but she remained alert. The world had taught her to never let guard down completely. Yet even as her eyes grew heavy, she allowed herself the smallest measure of trust. The rancher had shown kindness without asking for sacrifice, and she dared to hope that maybe, for once, she would not have to pay a price beyond her effort. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought of her journey, the miles walked, the hunger endured, and the fear overcome. She thought of the times she had begged, bartered, and survived only to face rejection. And now, for the first time in many months, she felt the possibility of safety, if only temporary. She resolved that she would not squander this chance. She would do whatever work was needed, protect her child, and hold on to hope as tightly as she had held her daughter's hand all those long days across the plains. The night was quiet except for the occasional low sound of animals outside and the crackle of the fire. The woman and her daughter slept, bodies weary but hearts carrying a flicker of light. For the first time in a long while, hunger had been met with compassion, and desperation had been answered with dignity. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, this small victory became a turning point. It was the moment when despair met mercy, and learned that kindness could exist even in the harshest times. The next morning the sun rose slowly over the open plains, casting a soft golden light across the ranch. The woman awoke to the sound of birds and the faint rustle of the wind through the trees. For the first time in many days, she did not wake with a knot of fear in her stomach. Her daughter stirred beside her, blinking sleep from her eyes, and the woman felt a quiet relief. They had survived the night. They had food. They had warmth. And, surprisingly, they had hope. As they moved quietly through the house, the woman noticed small signs of life and routine. The rancher was already at work, tending to the animals with calm efficiency. Horses were being fed, fences checked, and water troughs refilled. Everything had a rhythm, a steady beat, that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the woman's recent life. She realized that stability could be as comforting as food, and for the first time, she allowed herself to observe without fear. She also began to notice the way the rancher looked at them. His eyes were careful but not judgmental. He studied the little girl's face with concern, then glanced at the mother with something closer to understanding than suspicion. It was rare to see someone observe another person so fully without immediately making assumptions. The woman felt a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. Who was this man who treated strangers with such patience and care? She could not answer that, but she knew she had been given a chance she might never have expected. When breakfast was ready, the rancher invited them to sit at the simple wooden table. He placed warm bread and porridge before the child, who ate eagerly, her small hands trembling with hunger that had been held back for so long. The woman watched her, feeling relief mixed with lingering guilt. She had brought her child here in desperation, ready to sacrifice herself, and yet the man had given them food freely. It was more than she had dared to hope for. After the meal, the rancher spoke gently. "There are chores to be done," he said, "not as a demand, but as an invitation. If you are willing, you can help around the ranch. It will give you a safe place to stay, and your daughter can stay close to you." His words were simple, practical, and free of judgment. The woman nodded quickly. She would do anything. Pride had no place here. Survival, dignity, and care for her child were all that mattered. The work began slowly. The woman learned to feed the animals, sweep the barns, and tend to small repairs around the property. Her hands, calloused from long days of walking and previous labor, adapted quickly. Each task gave her a sense of purpose she had almost forgotten. She was not just surviving anymore, she was contributing. She felt a new kind of strength rising within her, quiet but steady. For the first time in months, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if only temporarily. Her daughter, once too weak to explore, began to play cautiously near the house. She observed the horses, watched the chickens, and even laughed softly when a small goat bumped her hand. The woman kept a careful eye on her, but she also allowed her child the freedom to experience joy, something she had almost forgotten existed. It was a delicate balance, protecting while letting go, but it brought moments of light into their otherwise heavy lives. As the day passed, the woman noticed something more profound about the rancher. He did not ask for repayment in ways that made her feel indebted or ashamed. He did not question her past, her identity, or her choices. Instead, he simply offered opportunity and guidance. His actions spoke louder than words. Kindness did not always come with a price. It could be unconditional, rooted in human compassion rather than expectation. The woman reflected on this as she worked. Years of struggle had taught her that kindness was always conditional, that help required sacrifice or humiliation. But here, in this small, sunlit ranch, she was learning something new. She was learning that mercy could exist without demand, that people could act with generosity purely because it was right. It was a lesson that challenged her deeply, forcing her to reconsider what she believed about the world. By evening, the chores were complete, and the woman had earned a quiet pride. She had worked with strength and care, proving to herself that she could face challenges without fear. Her daughter sat nearby, exhausted but happy, a small smile on her face as she rested against her mother. The sight filled the woman's chest with warmth. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where her child could grow safely, even if only for a little while. That night, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, the woman and her daughter sat quietly by the fire. The rancher had gone to check on the animals one last time before nightfall. In the soft glow of the firelight, the woman thought about the journey that had brought them here. She remembered the long days of walking, the hunger that had gnawed at her child, and the fear that had never left her side. And she realized something important. Survival was no longer just about enduring pain. It was also about recognizing and accepting kindness when it appeared. Her daughter leaned against her, exhausted but comforted. The woman stroked her hair gently, feeling both relief and an ache she could not describe. She had thought she would need to sacrifice herself, that the world would demand everything in exchange for mercy. But she had been wrong. She had been given a gift she did not fully understand, a chance to rest, to work with dignity, and to watch her child flourish. As they prepared to sleep, the woman reflected on the subtle ways the rancher had changed her view of the world. He had not only fed her daughter, but had also restored a small measure of faith. He had shown that compassion could exist even in harsh times, and that survival did not always require surrendering one's dignity. It was a quiet revelation, one that she would carry with her long after they left the ranch. The night was calm, with the faint sounds of animals and the wind outside. The woman and her daughter lay close together, bodies weary but spirits lighter than they had been in weeks. Hope, fragile but persistent, began to take root in their hearts. For the first time in a long time, the woman allowed herself to believe that there might be more moments like this, moments where safety, food, and kindness were not out of reach. As sleep approached, the woman thought about the future. She knew life would remain difficult. The plains were unforgiving, and the world often treated the desperate harshly. But she also knew something new. There were people who could act with decency, who could offer help without expectation, and who could remind a weary traveler that hope was still possible. This knowledge, small as it was, carried a strength that hunger and fear could not destroy. The rancher's actions had set something in motion. By feeding the child, offering work, and showing simple, quiet care, he had created a turning point, not just for the woman and her daughter, but for how they saw the world. They began to understand that survival was not only about endurance, it was also about accepting help, learning, and moving forward with dignity. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, for the first time in months, they could walk it with a measure of confidence. By the next morning, a routine had formed. The woman awoke early, checked on her daughter, and began her chores with a sense of purpose. The child, now stronger and more confident, played safely nearby. Each task completed, each moment of care given and received, reinforced the lesson she was learning. Kindness and effort, when combined, could sustain life and restore hope. It was a lesson she had never expected to learn in the middle of desperation, yet it was now central to her survival and growth. Even as the days passed, the woman remained aware of the fragility of their situation. She knew that life could change in an instant, and that challenges could return. But she also realized that she was no longer alone. In this quiet, sunlit ranch, she had found not just food and shelter, but trust, guidance, and an example of human compassion. It was a rare and valuable gift, one that she intended to honor through hard work, care for her daughter, and a willingness to face the uncertain future with strength and hope. By the end of the third day, the woman understood something important. Survival was no longer a desperate struggle fought alone. It could involve connection, learning, and quiet partnership. The rancher had not just fed them. He had shown them a path toward something more, something that resembled life as it was meant to be, even in a harsh and unforgiving world. The woman felt a deep, quiet gratitude, knowing that this experience would shape not only their present, but also the way she approached every challenge to come. Days turned into a rhythm, and the woman began to notice small changes in herself and her daughter. The child's cheeks were no longer pale, and her eyes sparkled with a cautious curiosity. She laughed softly when she chased the chickens or watched the goats play. Each sound of laughter was like a note of music to the woman's ears, a sign that her daughter was healing, not just physically, but emotionally. The woman felt a mixture of relief and wonder. It was almost unbelievable that they had reached a place where safety and nourishment were possible. The rancher continued his quiet routine, tending to animals, repairing fences, and performing his daily tasks. He did not demand much from the woman, only that she put honest effort into the chores she undertook. There was no harshness in his instructions, no anger if something was done imperfectly. It was a way of teaching patience and diligence, while also allowing the woman to regain a sense of confidence in herself. She noticed that she began to smile more often, not from relief alone, but from the satisfaction of work done well, and the knowledge that she could provide for her child in some small way. At first, the woman had feared being judged for her past or for her desperation, but the rancher never asked about it. He did not press for explanations or test her intentions. He acted as if the woman's honesty and effort were enough. This simple, quiet acceptance began to heal old wounds. She realized that people could care without demanding something in return, and that trust could exist in small but meaningful ways. It was a lesson she had almost forgotten in the long, lonely days of wandering and struggle. The child, growing stronger by the day, became more adventurous. She learned to feed the chickens and gather eggs under her mother's watchful eye. She helped sweep the floor and carry small baskets of grain. Each small task gave her confidence and purpose, and the woman felt a swell of pride. Watching her daughter grow in strength and independence reminded the mother of the life she had once imagined, a life not defined solely by survival but by growth, learning, and joy. One afternoon, the woman had a moment alone while tending to the barn. She paused to watch the horizon, where the plains met the sky in endless stretches of gold and green. Memories of the harsh journey here came rushing back. The long days of walking, the nights spent under the cold, open sky, and the constant worry about her daughter's survival. She had carried that fear like a heavy cloak, one that had weighed on her body and soul. Now, she realized, the cloak was beginning to lift. The child was safe, fed and cared for, and the woman herself had begun to regain a sense of hope she had not felt in months. As the sun lowered in the sky, the woman reflected on the lessons she was learning. She had come to the ranch expecting judgment, sacrifice, and perhaps even humiliation. She had prepared to give herself in exchange for her child's survival, believing that no one would help freely. But here, she had discovered something different. The rancher's kindness was not conditional. It was not motivated by expectation or profit. It was an act of humanity, pure and simple, and it challenged everything she had believed about the world. In the evenings, the woman often sat quietly with her daughter by the fireplace. The little girl would tell stories she had invented or recall moments from their past travels, and the woman would listen, laughing softly, feeling her heart lighten with every word. The child's innocence and resilience reminded her of why she had endured so much. She had survived hardships not for herself, but for the chance to see her daughter live, grow, and smile. And now, watching her child regain strength and joy, the woman felt a renewed sense of purpose. The rancher's presence was steady and quiet, a constant reminder that not all people sought to harm or exploit. He gave guidance when needed, offered advice when asked, and allowed space for the woman to act with her own judgment. His actions taught her a subtle but powerful lesson. True care respects boundaries, honors dignity, and nurtures growth. The woman began to internalize this lesson, realizing that she could provide the same kind of love and respect to her daughter. One morning, a task required the woman to work alongside the rancher in the fields. They moved in silence for a while, each focused on their work. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke. "You are a strong woman," he said quietly. "It shows in how you care for your child, and it shows in your work here." The woman paused, unsure how to respond. Compliments had rarely come easily to her. She had long been judged for being too weak or too desperate, but here the words felt genuine, and she felt warmth rise in her chest. It was not just recognition, it was validation of her perseverance, her courage, and her love. The child, observing from a distance, waved when she noticed her mother smiling. The woman returned the gesture, feeling an unexpected lightness. These small moments, simple but profound, became part of the healing process. Each day at the ranch reinforced the idea that life could include kindness, effort, and quiet joy, even after immense hardship. It was not an instant transformation, but a gradual realization that survival did not have to come at the expense of dignity or hope. As the days went on, the woman grew more confident in her abilities. She took initiative, learning how to care for the animals and maintain the property efficiently. The rancher began to trust her with more responsibility, giving her tasks without constant supervision. This trust reinforced her sense of self-worth. She realized that her journey had not ended with arrival at the ranch. It had entered a new chapter, one where she could rebuild strength, dignity, and confidence while providing care for her child. Even as life improved, the woman never forgot the fear and desperation that had brought them here. Those experiences remained a part of her, shaping her caution and empathy. She treated every small act of kindness with reverence, understanding how rare and precious it was. Her gratitude was not just for food or shelter. It was for the opportunity to see goodness in action, to learn from it, and to carry it forward in how she raised her daughter. The child's laughter became a symbol of resilience. Each day she played, explored, and learned. It reminded the mother why she had endured so much. Hunger and fear had shaped them, but love had guided them. The rancher's simple acts of care had sparked a chain reaction, teaching the woman that compassion could transform life even in the midst of struggle. By the end of the 4th week, the woman had settled into a routine. She woke with the sun, fed and cared for her child, completed her chores, and observed the small joys around her. Life was no longer a constant battle for survival. It had become a process of growth, learning, and quiet healing. The rancher continued his guidance, offering support without demand, and allowing the woman and her daughter the space to regain confidence in themselves. At night, when the house was quiet and the fire burned low, the woman reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the harsh plains, the nights of hunger, and the endless search for safety. She thought about the moment she had reached the ranch, expecting to offer herself in exchange for mercy. And she thought about the man who had refused her sacrifice, giving her child food instead, and showing her a path toward dignity and hope. It was in these quiet moments that the woman realized the depth of what she had learned. Survival was no longer about enduring alone. It was about recognizing kindness, accepting help, and rebuilding life step by step. It was about teaching her daughter that the world could be harsh but also good, that people could act with care without expectation, and that hope, once found, could be nurtured into strength. By the end of the month, the child was healthy, happy, and playful. She explored the ranch without fear, her laughter echoing across the open land. The woman had learned to breathe more easily, to work with purpose, and to trust in small but meaningful acts of kindness. She had been given a chance to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. 5NW, the rancher's quiet guidance and generosity had shown her that survival could coexist with hope, that care could be given without demand, and that life, even in hardship, could include moments of light, laughter, and love. The woman now saw the world differently. She understood that hardship and kindness could exist side by side, that trust could be rebuilt, and that the smallest acts of compassion could change a life forever. Her daughter had survived hunger and fear, and the woman herself had survived the heavy weight of desperation and shame. Together they had discovered a truth she would carry with her always, that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, compassion, dignity, and hope could shine through. The days at the ranch had grown steady, comfortable, and filled with a sense of quiet purpose. The woman and her daughter had settled into a routine, and the work, while sometimes tiring, gave them a reason to rise each morning. The child, once frail and weak, now ran through the fields with energy and laughter, her small voice carrying across the open land. The woman watched her, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude. Each smile, each step, each small discovery her daughter made felt like a victory after months of struggle and fear. The rancher continued to treat them with steady kindness, offering guidance, but never forcing them to do more than they were capable of. His presence was quiet yet firm, a constant reminder that the world could contain fairness and compassion even in difficult times. He did not interfere unnecessarily, and he allowed the woman to make decisions for herself and her child. Through this, she began to understand the value of respect, not just for others, but also for herself. She realized that dignity could survive hardship, and that strength could exist alongside care and vulnerability. Over the following weeks, the woman began to take more initiative. She learned to manage small tasks around the ranch independently, feeding animals, mending fences, and preparing simple meals. She found satisfaction in these tasks, a sense of purpose she had not known since before her journey began. Each completed chore was more than just work. It was a reminder that she could face challenges, that she had value, and that she could provide for her child without giving up her dignity. The feeling was new and powerful, and she carried it carefully in her heart. Her daughter became increasingly curious about the world around her. She would chase the chickens, play near the edge of the fields, and sometimes sit quietly by the fence, watching the horizon. Her laughter and energy brought light to the woman's days, making every hardship they had endured seem slightly more distant. The woman encouraged her child, teaching her small lessons about responsibility, kindness, and observation. It was a time of growth for both of them, as the mother learned to balance protection with trust, and the child learned to explore safely under her mother's careful guidance. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, the woman reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the days of walking without food, the nights spent under cold skies, and the moments when hope had seemed impossible to find. She remembered how she had once felt that her only option was sacrifice, that she would have to give herself entirely to save her child, but that had not been the only way. The rancher's quiet kindness had shown her a different path, one where survival could coexist with dignity, where compassion could replace fear, and where hope could return even after despair. The woman realized that the rancher's act of kindness had changed more than just her daughter's immediate situation. It had transformed the way she saw the world. She had learned that people could act with care without expecting anything in return, that human connection could exist even in harsh circumstances, and that hope could be nurtured like a small flame, growing stronger each day if tended carefully. These lessons were now a part of her, and she knew they would guide her and her daughter long after they left the ranch. As the days passed, the woman began to think about the future. She understood that life outside the ranch would still be challenging, that there would still be dangers, hunger, and uncertainty, but she also realized that she was stronger than she had ever been. Her child was stronger. Together they had learned that kindness, trust, and resilience were as important as food and shelter. They had discovered that life could contain moments of safety, joy, and hope, even after months of struggle and fear. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in warm shades of orange and pink, the woman sat with her daughter on the porch of the ranch house. The child leaned against her mother, tired but happy from a day of play and work. The woman smiled softly, feeling a deep, quiet contentment. She knew that the time at the ranch was temporary, but she also understood that the lessons learned here would last forever. She had discovered the power of compassion, the importance of dignity, and the value of hope in the face of hardship. The rancher came outside to check on the animals one last time before nightfall. He paused to look at the woman and her daughter, and a small smile crossed his face. He had seen many people pass through the ranch, but few had carried the strength, love, and perseverance that this mother and child had shown. He did not speak, but his quiet acknowledgment said everything the woman needed to hear: that they had survived, that they had grown, and that they had the strength to continue beyond the safety of the ranch. That night, as the fire crackled and the stars shone brightly overhead, the woman thought about the journey ahead. She knew they would need to leave eventually to face the world once more, but she no longer feared it as she had before. She carried a new confidence and a deep understanding that kindness could exist even in the harshest times. She also understood that she had the power to create safety, joy, and love for her child, no matter where their path led. The little girl, now asleep beside her, stirred slightly and smiled in her dreams. The woman watched her, feeling a mix of gratitude and determination. She had survived. Her child had survived, and together they had discovered something far more valuable than immediate safety: the ability to hope, to trust, and to rebuild their lives with dignity. Every small lesson learned at the ranch, every act of kindness shown to them, and every effort they had made themselves became part of a foundation for the future. The woman reflected on what she had learned about strength and resilience. She realized that true strength was not only about surviving hardship, but also about accepting help when it was offered, learning from others, and using that knowledge to build a better life. Resilience was not just endurance. It was also the ability to carry hope, kindness, and dignity forward. Even after months of fear and struggle, she had discovered that these qualities were just as important as physical survival. By the following morning, the woman and her daughter had become comfortable in their surroundings, feeling at home in a place that had once seemed impossible to reach. Each day, the mother and child worked, learned, and played, forming routines that strengthened their bond and their confidence. The child's curiosity continued to grow, and the woman encouraged her to explore safely, teaching her small lessons about the world and about herself. In this environment, both mother and child flourished, learning to balance independence with caution, play with responsibility, and hope with careful vigilance. The rancher's presence remained a quiet but powerful influence, His actions had shown them that life could be fair, that people could care without expecting anything in return, and that strength could exist alongside compassion. The woman often reflected on his example, realizing that she wanted to carry this same approach forward in her own life and in how she raised her daughter. She understood that kindness was not weakness, and that dignity could coexist with need. As the sun set once more over the plains, the woman prepared for the evening. She fed her daughter, checked the animals, and tidied the space they had been given. Each action was done with care, thought, and a sense of purpose. It was no longer just about survival. It was about building a life, even in small steps, and teaching her child the values of compassion, respect, and resilience. The woman realized that these moments of care, though simple, were the foundation of a future where fear and desperation would not dominate their lives. Finally, as night fell, the woman sat quietly by the fire with her daughter asleep beside her. She reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the long walks through harsh land, the hunger, the fear, and the desperation that had once driven her to consider impossible sacrifices. She thought about the rancher's kindness, the trust she had learned to give and receive, and the lessons that would shape their future. And she understood something profound. Life could be harsh, but it could also be filled with moments of compassion, safety, and hope. And those moments could change everything. The woman knew that their time at the ranch was a turning point. She had been offered mercy when she had least expected it, and she had used that mercy to rebuild her strength and her daughter's. The child was no longer weak. She was growing, learning, and exploring the world with curiosity and joy. And the woman had regained her own sense of purpose, her confidence, and her belief in the possibility of a better life. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, armed not only with survival skills, but with the lessons of compassion, resilience, and hope that had been shown to them. In the quiet of the night, the woman promised herself that she would carry these lessons forward. She would teach her daughter the importance of kindness, the value of dignity, and the power of hope. She would remember the rancher's generosity not as a simple act of feeding a child, but as a profound example of human goodness that could change lives. And she would face the future with the knowledge that they had survived despair, grown stronger through kindness, and discovered that life could hold safety, love, and light, even in the most difficult circumstances. As the stars shone over the plains, the woman closed her eyes, her daughter resting safely beside her, and she felt something she had not felt in months: peace. It was not the peace of certainty, but the peace of trust in life's possibilities, the peace of knowing that even after struggle and fear, hope could endure. The rancher's quiet acts had shown them a path forward, and the woman knew that they could carry it with them, wherever the world might take them next. The story ended not with grand triumph, but with quiet resilience. The woman and her daughter had survived hardship, been shown kindness, and learned the value of hope, compassion, and dignity. The world remained challenging, but they were no longer powerless. They had discovered that even in the harshest times, human goodness could light a way forward, and that love, perseverance, and courage could build the life worth living. And as they slept beneath the stars, they carried that knowledge in their hearts, ready to face tomorrow with strength, hope, and an unbreakable bond between mother and child.